When I was young, I had a friend. I know that's hard to believe. But he lived down the street. His name was Brent. And Brent had an older brother named Chad. And Brent and Chad had the coolest friends because they always had something to do with cars. Whether it was the newest Hot Wheels or they would build these awesome kind of kit model cars. But one Christmas day, Brent called me. He said, "Dave, you got to come down and see what it is that I got for Christmas." All right, I'm excited. So I go down, and in the garage is a box. And the box still has its like cellophane wrapper on it. And so we take the wrapper off of this box, and it's a remote-controlled car that we get to put together ourselves. I'm so excited. It's the best Christmas gift ever. And it wasn't even mine. So we open the box. We take all the parts out. We lay them out carefully. And then we open the instruction book. Yes, young men who read instructions. The funny thing about that was the very first instruction was open the box. So it's funny because you couldn't read the first instruction without having already completed it, so we were way ahead of the game. So we started in building. We were fixing decals and tightening screws and nuts and bolts, and we put the batteries in. We took it outside. We realized, one part left over. But it was small, it was kind of looked insignificant, so we thought, it'll be fine. Maybe it's just extra. There's no way we made a mistake. So we take this thing outside, we set it in the street, and it takes off. And it's flying up and down the street, going, 350 miles an hour. That's fast. Then it happens. It's zooming away from us, and it starts to shake. The back right wheel flies off, and it starts tumbling down the street. So we go and we pick up all the pieces, and we're wondering what went wrong. So we look back at the instructions, and we realize the problem was this. A tiny flat washer. I know, some of you are like, this was the problem. This wrecked that Christmas gift. Turns out that this washer was a centering device for the dress. And it helped stabilize the entire thing. The one thing that we didn't put on. I'd also but forgotten about this story until this past week. I was having a conversation with Pastor Brian, and it kind of came to mind again. And it made me stop and think about what is it that stabilizes me? What is the center of my life? For those of you that have gone through the confirmation process, either here or at another church, you would have studied Luther's Small Catechism. And in that, Martin Luther gives explanations for the Lord's Prayer, the Apostles' Creed, and the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments, the first commandment is this: you shall have no other gods before me. And Martin Luther's simplest explanation for this one was that we are to fear, love, and trust God above all else. Several years ago, the Barna organization, one of the nation's leading research firms, polled Americans about the Ten Commandments. And in that poll, Barna found that 3 out of 4 Americans claim that they are completely true to the first commandment. For 3 out of 4 people, this commandment is no big deal. At least it's not if we are to believe this poll. Most Christians don't have a problem with the first commandment because in its purest context, it means that we're not to have any other deities before the one true God. But to have a God isn't just acknowledging a God's existence. According to Jewish scholar Jeffrey Tegay, the word here implies a personal relationship. Like a man who has a wife, or parents who have children, there is a relationship. Now the phrase other gods appears 65 times in the Bible, and it always refers to the various gods and goddesses outside of Israel that were worshipped in the ancient world. In our postmodern culture, we don't call gods by names anymore, but we venerate many of the same gods, just without the same names. The French mathematician Pascal was right when he said, there's a God-shaped vacuum in each one of us. We as Americans worship our gods with the same zealous devotion as the Babylonians, the Greeks, and the Romans did theirs. Only the names have disappeared. Now, how can a person know what God they worship? Well, whatever is the central reference point in our life, that's our God. Martin Luther also said that your God is whatever it is that you run to in the time of your need. Names or no names, everyone has a God. We tend to run to things that are tangible, things that we can see when we face troubles here on earth. Because in our human finite minds, it's easiest to seek out something that can give us instant satisfaction. I want to name a few of the more prominent gods that creep into our lives. I do want to say that these things are not bad, per se. These things are just things that can get in the way of the relationship that God wants to have with us. The first one, and it's built into our very DNA as Americans, is the God of success. Again, being successful is not bad. But all too often, it supersedes developing a deeper relationship with God. Matthew 6:21 says, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. One of the greatest examples of this is found in literature in Charles Dickens' classic, A Christmas Carol. Ebenezer Scrooge spends his entire life trying to gain more wealth. And he does it at the detriment of his relationships with everyone around him. He lives a miserly life. He lives a horrible existence. And he almost loses everything. I've spent time in the corporate world where being cutthroat is actually encouraged, where deals can be made that are sometimes shady and underhanded. And success is a constant battle of who can get to the top of the ladder first. Is it possible that success is one of those gods that can get in the way of our relationship? The second is society. Every year during the 9th grade confirmation process, we take one of my favorite trips. And it's down to the Museum of Tolerance in Los Angeles. And there we get to learn about Adolf Hitler's version of the God of society. Hitler put his ideology of Nazism at the top of Germans' priorities. And he demanded that every German institution do the same. And virtually all of them complied. The press, the schools, the labor unions, the military, and the university. This November, we're all going to go to the polls. And we're going to vote for the candidate that we feel is best to take the highest political office in our country. There is a very heated campaign going on right now, just in case you didn't know. But how much emphasis do we place on our elected leaders? And can the leaders of our society be viewed as gods to which we place too much emphasis? The next God is that of pleasure. We all like to do all kinds of various things, and I firmly believe that we should all have hobbies and interests. But it is possible for those things to get in the way. Reality TV is now dominating the airwaves, and sometimes I can't look away. There was a new show on that I had to watch because it was Collection Intervention. And what it was this licensed therapist would go into people's homes who were collectors and help them start to figure out how to get rid of some of the things in their lives. The episode that I caught, this lady was obsessed with Star Wars. I like Star Wars. I thought, okay, let's see what she's got. But this was a problem. She even convinced her husband, we need to have a Star Wars wedding. Complete with a Millennium Falcon wedding cake that they didn't eat any of so it could be preserved. And the ceremony was presided over by Darth Vader. I'm not sure why they chose him, but at one point, the therapist is talking to this lady, and she says, would you be willing to sell some of these things that are overtaking your house? The lady actually took a step back and said, I just felt a disturbance in the force. So this lady, the god of pleasure, had taken over her life, almost to the detriment of her marriage. The last one we're going to look at is quite possibly the most difficult. And it's the god of self. The origin of this kind of worship goes all the way back to the 3rd chapter of Genesis, when the serpent whispered, you shall be as gods yourselves. Perhaps the Greek god Narcissus is an example of the god of self. Narcissus, the god who fell in love with his own image, and he sat staring into a mirror day after day. It's no accident the sociologist Christopher Lasch has dubbed American culture a culture of narcissism. We see this in many people's obsession to have a perfect body, to make the body somehow immortal by working out. And if that doesn't work, then they can turn to plastic surgery and they can go to these crazy, crazy lengths to beautify themselves. We also see it when someone picks up a gun and takes the life of someone else, thereby saying, I have the power of life and death, which is reserved for the one true God. And we see it when people consult psychic friends and crystal balls to know the future. We seek to edify ourselves first, often by seeking the previous gods of success, society, and pleasure. I love classic rock and roll. I love listening to it on the radio. But if you look at the history of classic rock and roll, there is a long string of people who fell into this trap of the god of self and paid dearly for it. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain, Freddie Mercury, the names could just go on. Suddenly, the claim that 3 out of 4 Americans are completely true to the first commandment sounds kind of hollow, and it drips with self-deception. We have simply lost the ability to identify the false gods in our lives. Everyone has a god, whether it goes by the old traditional names of Zeus or Dionysus, or more modern names like climbing the corporate ladder or finding yourself. Everyone has a god. But now the way that this first commandment is worded, it sounds awfully negative. After all, it's a prohibition. It's a thou shalt not. there's a positive side to this prohibition. You see, God doesn't want us to have any other gods because He wants us to have Him. Deuteronomy 6, verses 4 and 5 gives us what is called the Shema. And it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one." And when Jesus was confronted by the Pharisees, and they tried to trick Him by asking Him, "Master, what is the greatest commandment?" He responded by saying, "The greatest commandment is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind, and all your strength." So in thinking about the first commandment of having no other gods before the one true God, I believe that what it comes down to is what we value. Because what we value will ultimately determine what we do. Let's say that again. What we value will ultimately determine what we do. If we value success, society, pleasure, self, then we will seek those things. But if we value our relationship with God, then we will seek Him. So I guess the question here is, what is your center? What is that thing that stabilizes you? What is that thing that you value? This morning as you leave worship, the ushers will be standing in the back. And they've got one of these for each one of them. This tiny little washer can be a reminder of your stabilizer, of your center. Pick one up. Take it with you. Put it in your pocket. Put it somewhere where you will see it. Tape it to your desk or put it on your mirror and let it be a reminder to you of the first commandment. That God wants to be the center of your universe. All this month we're going to be in a series called The Best Hour of the Week. And we're going to look at different ways to deepen our relationship with the one true God in worship. I sincerely hope you'll join us as we take this journey together. Amen. The peace of the Lord be with you all. Thank you. Please take a moment and share that peace with those around you.